Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hey, have you read this book? This episode is about the book Walking Free, written by Munjed Muderis. This extraordinary true story takes us on a thrilling ride, following Munjed's life as he escapes from war-torn Iraq on a dangerous journey to find freedom in Australia, only to be placed in a detention centre for refugees, where he had to endure appalling conditions. Munjed was born in 1972 into a wealthy aristocratic family in Iraq. His father was a judge and an intellectual, and his mother was a teacher. Munjed is their only child, but he has many cousins. When Saddam Hussein rose in power to become president of Iraq, he introduced reforms in medicine, education and transport to improve the lives of the people. However, when Saddam started a war with Iran in 1980, the Iraqi economy collapsed and professional people could not earn a living. Dissent wasn't tolerated and hundreds of thousands of people were tortured or murdered by Saddam's henchmen. As the war dragged on, both sides suffered terrible losses, and over 500,000 military personnel and civilians died. Munjed went to an elite high school in Baghdad, where Saddam's sons, Qusay and Uday, and nephew Omar also attended. These sons and nephew of Saddam were ignorant teenage thugs and a law unto themselves. They got their bodyguards to beat up the other students who they became jealous of. Despite the destruction of the war and uncertainty of the future, Munjed went to medical school and helped the injured victims of bombing. To escape the bombing, many families, including Munjed's, left Baghdad to other areas of Iraq where they thought it would be safer. For months in Baghdad, there was no electricity and no petrol. The economic sanctions imposed on Iraq by the UN after Iraq invaded Kuwait in 1990 meant a shortage of food and thousands died as a result. Bribery and corruption was widespread. Military service became compulsory, and Saddam declared that army deserters should be punished by getting the top half of their ears surgically removed. Without any warning, military police stormed into the hospital where Munjed was working and demanded that the surgical doctors perform these operations on busloads of deserters. When Munjed's boss refused to comply with the military police, he was dragged outside and shot. Munjed quickly decided that he wasn't going to do these operations either. Terrified, he hid in the ladies' toilets for hours until the guards left. He knew that his life was in danger because he had defied military orders. Munjed managed to get a false passport and escape to Jordan. From there he went to Malaysia, then Indonesia, then on a perilous journey on a fishing boat, which was so crowded with 160 refugees that there was only standing room. After 36 hours at sea, as they came close to Christmas Island, the boat was intercepted by the Australian Federal Police. After a few days, the refugees were transported to Curtin Detention Centre in Western Australia, where the conditions were appalling. The detainees lived in tents with no access to phones, TV, newspapers or radio. The camp was surrounded by high barbed wire fences in the desert, with the nearest town 200 kilometres away. The refugees were issued with numbers, which were used instead of their names. The detainees were given nothing to do and the children were not taught anything. They were told that they weren't welcome in Australia and to go back to their own country. Munjed could speak English, so he became the interpreter for the other detainees. They had no idea how long they were to be imprisoned. They had to queue for hours for their meals, which were tasteless and always the same. Some people became so desperate that there were riots, a hunger strike and a mass breakout. Munjed was charged with organising the breakout and was sent to a maximum security prison. He was found to be innocent and transported back to Curtin. Finally, In 2000, after 9 months in detention, Munjed was able to leave Curtin. Within 2 months of being released, Munjed took up a position as a doctor in Mildura Hospital. He also worked in various other hospitals in Australia while he trained to become an orthopaedic surgeon, eventually becoming a world leader in osseointegration surgery. This amazing personal story is about a young man's journey to achieve his dream of becoming an orthopaedic surgeon during the war in Iraq and starting life in a new country as a prisoner in a detention centre where he was only called number 982. You may think that Munjed was an exceptional case of a refugee becoming a valuable member of society. However, this is not the case. There were 13 qualified doctors detained in Curtin when Munjed was there. 12 of these refugees became specialist doctors in Australia. Munjed raises some important points in this book. Detaining refugees for long periods is not good for anyone. Because they feel like there is no hope for them, the asylum seekers become angry and depressed. They may cause riots, harm themselves, and go on hunger strikes. When they are eventually released, many are emotionally scarred, have lost their work skills, don't speak English, and likely to become dependent on welfare. If they were treated humanely, taught English and Australian culture, and be allowed to work, they would be less traumatised and be able to assimilate and contribute more to society when they are released. Locking the asylum seekers up in appalling conditions is inhumane, especially as they have already suffered so much from the brutality of war in their own country. The politicians in Australia want to appear tough by locking up the refugees for long periods, but really it's just a terrible waste of money and does not make the refugees want to go back to the country they left, where their lives were at risk. We need to show more compassion for asylum seekers for our own benefit as well as theirs. After all, a huge part of the population in Australia are descended from families who have fled from war, oppression or poverty, so we should be supporting those who are now facing the same plight. I highly recommend this inspirational book. If you live in Australia and you think that we should keep the refugees out or lock them up in detention centres, you need to read this book. Thanks for watching.